Hello, it's Randi Rhodes. Here's a clip from our show, and go to randirhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.
Mary had a little man.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show. Turn up your
John is
mind.
great, and she is a great gentleman. He's now president for life. President for life. No, he's great. Hey, look, he was able to do that. I think it's great. Maybe we'll have to give that a shot someday. He's the most powerful president in 100 years, person in the 100 years in China. It's great. And he treated us tremendously well when I went over there.
Fernand and Amandi back on the Randi Rhodes Show, subbing in for the goddess, Randi Rhodes. And folks, I was talking about it earlier. Not only is it not funny, I am of the opinion that we need to be acting scared if we love this country, if we love this democracy, because, there's a saying in Spanish, jugando se dice las cosas, which basically means you say real truths kidding around. It's why the great stand-up comics sometimes cut through the bone, because they tell you hard truths with a laugh and a smile. And that's why when Donald Trump talks about aping and copying what Xi Jinping is now doing in China, who's basically the de facto president for life, I'm not kidding around. And it's why, for me, the most important question in America today is, what is your plan if Robert Mueller is fired and removed from his position as the special counsel, which means uncharted waters for the United States, which means the rule of law is no longer the guiding principle of the land. And here to talk to us about what the Republican response should be, Scotty's like, are you bringing a Republican on the Randi Rhodes Show? The answer is yes.
I'm going to get hammered for this one.
Because he is the last honest Republican, folks. If any of you have been watching MSNBC or CNN or Fox or any of the major news channels, you can't miss him, because he is the last honest Republican in America. And it is former Congressman Dave Jolly. We welcome him to the broadcast. Congressman Jolly, welcome to the show.
Hey, great to be with you, and very kind of you for that introduction. Thank you.
Congressman, I know that you have been vociferous about warning Donald Trump in your every appearance on the cable television shows that he cannot fire Robert Mueller, that he should not fire Robert Mueller. But I want to talk about the scenario planning situation, Congressman, where that eventuality happens. What should be the reaction of all Republicans and Republicans in Congress if indeed Donald Trump orchestrates the firing of the special counselor?
Well, Republicans, as the controlling party of Congress, should immediately commence impeachment hearings and bring the scholars in and determine whether this rises to the level of an impeachable offense. Impeachment is a political question, and I think it would satisfy an impeachable offense certainly as a political question, whether or not there was a legal violation or not. The problem, though, Fernand, and I say this with deep regret for members of my party, I do think Donald Trump has succeeded in galvanizing the Republican base to believe that firing Mueller is correct, to believe that this is a witch hunt against Donald Trump. And as a result, Republican senators and members of Congress are not going to have the political support of their base if they speak out against the firing. So we may see Lindsey Graham and others say, yes, that could be the end of his presidency. But if they continue to say that, that may be the end of that senator's career as well. And I'm not sure we'll see that fortitude among Republicans on Capitol Hill.
But Congressman Jolly, aren't there some issues? Is this for you the type of red line that it is worth sacrificing one's political career over, given what it would mean to fire a special counselor who seems to be, with every passing day and every passing news report, honing in on, if not an obstruction of justice case, certainly a case that shows that the president has been engaged in activity that is, if not illegal, that is impeachable?
It certainly should. Look, I would encourage my fellow or former Republican colleagues, there's no shame in putting country over party, even if that means the end of your political career. And it will be interesting to see. Look, I was one who, first time I ever ran for office was Congress. And when I was sworn in, I felt that immense responsibility of holding the public trust, right? I didn't play games up there. I woke up every morning knowing that I had this very awesome responsibility to represent constituents. If senators and members of Congress feel that way, they will be willing to step up. But if they're just out there to protect their own political career, which I think too many are, again, my fear is Republicans do nothing, which is why I have said I think the Republic is safer if Democrats take control in November.
Folks, that is the words from a former Republican member of Congress, Congressman David Jolly. And Congressman, the question of the day we're asking, I'm going to let you be the first one to answer on the show today. And again, I know it's a hypothetical, but all indications are, Congressman, slowly the drumbeat seems to be gathering momentum. We saw, of course, today the firing of the president's personal attorney, some folks interpreting that as a sign that he may indeed be closer to the firing of Mueller. First, two-part question for you, Congressman. What will be your reaction? What is your plan? What will you do if the special counsel is fired? And what would you advise Americans, country over party Americans, be it Republicans, Independents, or Democrats? How should the American body politic react if this happens?
I think you engage in demonstrations like we're going to see on Saturday among those asking for greater restrictions on firearms. I think there has to be an overwhelming political presence of voters saying we're not going to stand for this. You know, the test for me is not so much about Donald Trump. I never had confidence in him. I never supported him. So there's no confidence in Donald Trump for me to lose. But if Republicans sit on their hands on Capitol Hill, it becomes a moment where somebody like myself may begin to finally say, I'm out. This is not the party that I can defend any longer. This is not a party with the integrity that I once thought it had.
Congressman Jolly, you know, you talk about citizen reaction and physical manifestation of peaceful protests like we're going to be seeing this weekend in the March for Our Lives in Washington and other sites around the country. You, as a former lawmaker, what is the most effective way for Americans acting in this type of demonstration to make it crystal clear that this is a different type of engagement, that if they expect immediate results and not let, if you will, time and circumstances wait them out? I mean, from your perspective, what is the most effective way to do that? Is it sustained, almost national strike style protests, or is it targeted over days, over weeks? What is the best way you think that happened?
Yeah, it is a sustained demonstration with immense volume. And I will point to the failure of Republicans to repeal Obamacare. The reason they failed to repeal Obamacare is not because John McCain voted no. It's because there was not sufficient support from the American people, and they knew that because they heard for weeks upon months that the Republican alternative was not something the American people wanted. The Obamacare repeal went down because Americans made their voices heard loudly and strongly to their legislators. Fernand, I think we should operate under the assumption he's going to fire Mueller, and here's why. Donald Trump knows he has to end this before November one way or another. Because if Mueller sends his report to the Hill and Republicans control it, it will get pushed under the rug. But if this investigation goes on past November and Democrats take the House, I think the president knows he's very likely to face impeachment hearings, at least. Whether or not it's successful in moving towards a vote would be something to be determined later.
You know, Congressman Jolly, the other scenario I want to ask you about is, and this is for me the nightmare scenario, to be perfectly honest with you. You know, I sense and fear that while many Americans in the public opinion polls that have been conducted by my firm and many others show that Donald Trump is at a historically high disapproval rating, people are not satisfied with the presidency, the sense of actual urgency might not quite be there with just the sentiment, if you will. And I think that actually helps and plays into Donald Trump's standing. What happens if the reaction is not what you and I hope for, which is that sustained, physical, peaceful protest in the streets? Does that strengthen the hand of the president, and does it make the Republicans who might deflect and defect away from him that less likely to happen?
I think you're right. It certainly is, because he will be surrounded by a base that sticks with him through this. You know, I was working on the Hill during the impeachment hearings of Bill Clinton. And one of the final closing arguments of Democrats, and it was led by a Michigan congressman named David Bonnier. He was, I believe, number 2 on the Democratic side. He said to the Republicans, how dare you try to take away the president who was duly elected by this nation? The nation has already spoken, and they want Bill Clinton. That's what you're going to hear Republicans saying. And it is only going to feed and encourage and strengthen Donald Trump's resiliency. And to your point earlier, this is somebody who admires the authoritarianism of nation-state leaders around the globe, those who suffer no accountability politically because they are the strong men. Donald Trump is just fine to be looked at that way. He is not trying to protect the democratic institutions of the United States of America. He is trying to protect his own personal interests as he continues to plunder the White House and allows his family to do the same.
Congressman Jolly, just to, again, underscore the urgency, and I hear it in your voice, and I certainly see it in all of your appearances up and down the cable dial. Is it fair to say that if this happens, you think that Americans should sacrifice time from work, time from their kids? I mean, in other words, drop everything if this happens. Does this need to be an immediate show of force to kind of send the type of message to the Justice Department and other members of the party and just to the eyes of the world that the American people won't tolerate this?
I think so. I mean, I think this would be one of those final Nixonian moments by Donald Trump, and it is worth seeing 1 million people on the National Mall in Washington, D.C., coordinated with marches in cities around the country. Just like we are seeing with the gun march this weekend, well organized, supported by outside advocacy groups, saying at some point we have to take power back from a president who has gone too far. I do believe firing Mueller is that moment.
Last question for you, Congressman Jolly. I know that a lot of folks that you know are still proud to be Republicans. Many of them even by hook or by crook affiliated with this administration and are just as horrified by the actions of Donald Trump as Democrats and independents across the country. We had the reports come out of the White House earlier this week where after Donald Trump's disgraceful congratulations of Vladimir Putin for that sham election where he was literally told, according to the reports in the Washington Post and the briefing papers, it was literally one of these all caps, do not congratulate. What do you think is the role of people working today in the administration that are as concerned as we are? Should they resign and tell the world what's really going on, or should they continue to try and stay embedded inside and try and give some sort of direction to this chaotic presidency?
You know, I love that question because if you're putting country first and your head's screwed on right, I think if you can have the president's ear, you should be there. If you are only there to defend him and cover up for him and continue to lie to the American people on his behalf, then you're not putting country first. But Fernand, I've struggled with this in a scenario that I hope never happens in my life. What if I were asked as a ardent Trump critic to serve the president in this time? Is it a greater service to country to do so or not? And that is a very tough question. I do think overwhelmingly, though, and this is the bottom line for me as a Republican in a party led by Donald Trump, this is an incredibly embarrassing time to be a Republican. And there is a hard family conversation going on in the Republican Party, but also in the Democratic Party. One of the reasons people like me haven't left yet is there's not a home for me anywhere else. There's not a home in the Democratic Party for David Jolly today. There's not a home in the Republican Party either. But under Donald Trump, I do fear we will get to a moment where a person like myself says, I'm out. And if that means going to a third party, I don't know what that scenario would look like because we haven't faced a moment like this as a party until now under Donald Trump.
Well, you may be out of the Republican Party, but if you start the Jolly Party, I'm in. David Jolly.
I'm bringing back the Bull Moosers, Fernand, the Bull Moose Party.
He's bringing Bull Moose back, everybody. Folks, if you're not doing it already, do me a favor. He may be a Republican, but he is one of the honest ones, one of the good ones. It's David Jolly. Follow him on Twitter, @DavidJolly, and I'm sure we'll be seeing you later on tonight on the news, Congressman.
You got it, Fernand. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us. And, folks, we're going to come back with your calls on what I think is the most important question, not just of the day, the most important question in the world today, if you care about the United States of America. And it's a very simple one. If Donald Trump orchestrates the firing of special counsel Robert Mueller, and if you don't think it's happening, you're not paying attention, what is your plan? 561-270-3844. We will take your calls when we come back and answer to that question as Fernand Amandi continues subbing in for the goddess, Randi Rhodes.
Go to RandiRhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.